So what happens when you get a naval blockade, a deal that might not be a deal, and a sudden, blistering critique of America's oldest military alliance? Well, today we're breaking down a news report that connects all those dots, starting with a standoff in the Middle East and ending with some really big questions about the world order. Here's how we're going to walk through it. First, we'll get into the crisis itself, the Hormuz Standoff. Then, we'll look at the supposed deal that was meant to end it. From there, we're going to zoom out and see how this all sparked some major fallout for NATO. And finally, we'll ask the big one. Could this be a sign of a massive global realignment? All right, let's dive in.
Okay, so first things first, let's set the scene.
The whole story that this report focuses on kicks off with a U.S. military operation, and it had a pretty dramatic code name, Operation Epic Fury. The objective was clear: put as much pressure as possible on Iran using some serious naval might.
And it all comes down to this one spot on the map, the Strait of Hormuz. You have to understand a huge chunk of the world's oil flows through this incredibly narrow channel. So anytime there's trouble here, the entire global economy kind of holds its breath.
So the strategy detailed in the report was intense. We're talking a full-on U.S. Navy blockade of Iranian ports, and it came with an ultimatum. You have until Wednesday to make a deal, or the threat of bombs was, well, right back on the table.
And this pressure, it wasn't just talk. It had a real, tangible impact. The report says that in just a few days, the blockade forced at least 21 ships to just turn around. It was a serious economic squeeze.
So the pressure's on, the clock is ticking, and it really seemed like this whole thing was building towards some kind of breakthrough. But as you're about to see, the story of this deal was anything but simple.
And then, bam, we get this huge announcement from President Trump. The message was clear. The pressure worked, Iran caved, and the strait was open for business again. A total success, right? And the deal itself sounded massive. According to the president, Iran had agreed to some huge concessions: halt its nuclear program, hand over its enriched uranium, and stop funding groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. A pretty big deal. But, and this is a really big but, in the very same announcement, the president added this crucial little detail. The blockade, it was staying put until the deal was, quote, 100% complete and fully signed. So, wait, is the crisis over? Or isn't it? And this is where it all gets incredibly murky. Because you had the official claim from the White House saying a deal was done and the strait was open. But at the same time, commentators were pointing to reports from on the ground where Iranian forces were apparently telling ships the complete opposite, that it was not actually open. Total confusion. You'd think that this "is there a deal or not" confusion would be the main headline, right? Well, nope. The report shows how this whole standoff with Iran actually blew up into an unexpected and very public confrontation with America's oldest allies. And here's the absolute bombshell, this quote from President Trump. Apparently, after the crisis seems to be resolved, NATO offered to help, but Trump publicly rejected it. Commentators noted he basically compared it to getting a campaign donation after you've already won the election. Just wow. And that one comment just seemed to open the floodgates. It tapped into all these long simmering critiques of the alliance that commentators then began to list out: that NATO has become a paper tiger, that it's been coasting on U.S. support for decades, and that when push came to shove, it just didn't show up.
The discussion then got to the very heart of NATO. Article 5, the whole "an attack on one is an attack on all" principle. Now, okay, this wasn't a literal attack on the U.S., but one commentator argued that by staying on the sidelines during a major crisis, NATO failed to live up to the spirit of that agreement. And that raised some pretty serious questions about shared responsibility. And if you were looking for Exhibit A of this imbalance, commentators pointed straight to Ukraine. Here you have a massive war right on Europe's doorstep, a direct threat to the continent, and yet it was the U.S. that ended up spending, quote, an inordinate amount of money, which just reinforced this whole critique. So what does this all add up to? Well, the report argues this isn't just about one standoff or a few angry comments. This might actually be about the future of, well, everything. In fact, one commentator made the incredibly bold claim that these two events, the Iran crisis and the public criticism of NATO, aren't separate stories. They're actually symptoms of the same thing: a massive, really consequential realignment of global power happening right before our eyes. Which leads directly to a question that not too long ago would have been totally unthinkable to ask out loud.
Do we even need NATO anymore? According to the report, this question has officially moved from the fringe right into the mainstream debate. Now, it's not like the report just declared the alliance dead on arrival. It did touch on a potential path forward. But according to one voice, that path would require nothing less than a serious restructuring and a genuine recommitment from all its members to pull their own weight.
And that's the big, provocative thought the report leaves us with. Are we just watching another diplomatic spat that'll be old news next month? Or are we actually witnessing the very beginning of the end for the global order we've known for the last 75 years? It's a huge question, and maybe there just isn't an answer yet.